I tried to find something a bit fun, honestly, but again, at the time that I'm doing this, it's just gone 10:30 on Saturday morning. We're still, of course, trying to digest what happened yesterday at the Oval Office. I am still in shock. Like, not only myself, but I think the entire world, quite frankly, is in shock. Every single UK newspaper this morning, when I went on just a quick jaunt this morning, I stopped by the post office. Every single front page is in disbelief that this happened. One front page, I can't remember which paper it was, said it was the Fight House was their leading headline. But yeah, I think we're still all very, very, very much in shock on this. And we're still, obviously, I think, still waiting to see what happens. I have no doubt, not only maybe later on today, we might get some more movement, but certainly tomorrow when we see that summit take place with European leaders here in the UK tomorrow. Well, today, as when the video goes out, but tomorrow for me, I'm doing it. Yeah, they will be very, very. This will be the top of the discussion. As I said on the live stream, European strategic autonomy suddenly becomes top of the agenda for a lot, if not every single European country. Quite frankly, it's worrying beyond belief. Worrying beyond belief. However, I did find this because I think this is definitely something that should be talked about because this is something that where Farage is very, very vulnerable on the topic of Russia and Ukraine because he has spoken out quite a lot on shall we say in favor of Russia, of course, over the years, and he's been very, very uncomfortable, really talking about this subject overall, and I think it is definitely a subject where he is very, very weak on. And I think you can really take it to him. We saw that during the last general election when he trotted out the stance and he absolutely took a big hit in the polls. So before we do go on into having a look at this, please do remember to click on the like, the share button, and of course down below there is the Patreon page, the Buy Me Coffee link where you can buy me coffee, the YouTube thank you button, the Pony Club as well down below. And of course, as always, you can click the like and share button as well. So let us crack on today into this. So this coming from The Guardian. Labour now steps of attack on Farage and Reform over its pro-Russia stance. And I think absolutely, absolutely, you should do that. So Labour is now setting out to increase its attacks on Nigel Farage's Reform UK over its stance on Russia. Polling and focus groups show the public are firmly pro-Ukraine and against Vladimir Putin. Yeah, time and time again. I am very, very happy indeed. The British public is on the same page as that we are standing behind Ukraine on this. And I'm really glad that we are seeing that the British public really gets it, why we are supporting Ukraine. One cabinet source has said that Labour was now planning to take the fight to reform on the issue of the Ukraine war and the NHS after, quote, waking up to the party's softness on the stance on standing up to Putin. And remember, this week there was a vote in Parliament. Guess who wasn't there, or shall we say, who wasn't even bothered to show up? That was the Reform MPs. None of them turned up. All the main parties, of course, been grappling since the election with how to halt the momentum behind Nigel Farage's insurgency. And again, I'd like to sort of bring this up. You've had almost 200 plus by-elections at this point. They're not even in double figures. If they're, again, as popular as people say, surely you should be seeing this in voting results. We saw this in the run-up to the previous general election. We ain't seeing these victories materialize in these by-elections. But back to this. So, with Reform now often either tying or coming narrowly ahead of Labour the Conservatives in opinion polls, However, Labour and the SNP have now been increasing their criticism of Farage, in particular over Russia. In the last week, firstly for his claim last year that it was provoked into the war in Ukraine, but also for his statement in 2014 that the Russian president was the world leader he most admired. Keir Starmer accused Farage of fawning over Putin in a very unusually direct jibe this week, while SNP's Westminster leader Stephen Flynn accused the Reform MPs of being Putin's poodles, after most of them did not turn up to the big parliamentary debate on defence and security. In response, Farage said the Prime Minister appeared to be, quote, terribly upset and scared of him. Well, you didn't turn up to that meeting. What does that say about you? Meanwhile, of course, John Sweeney, the SNP leader, called Reform leader an accomplice to the Russian agenda, an apologist of the Russian agenda. With defence and security now top of the national agenda, polling shows that the UK is still very much firmly in support of Ukraine and opposition to Russia, despite Donald Trump's move to strike a deal with Putin to end the war, and his negative statements about Zelensky. Luke Terrell, an executive director of the think tank More in Common, has said that one of the things that we know that Reform is out of step with the public on Russia and Ukraine. 7 out of 10 Brits say that it's important for the UK that Ukraine wants to win the war. Similarly, the Reform's rise did look unstoppable in the election until Farage made his comments about Putin and Ukraine, as we said before on this. But, of course, with Reform having dipped slightly in recent polls, Terrell said that the public may now, of course, be responding to the uncertainty of global events rather than any specific concerns about Reform's position on Russia. However, some of Reform's insiders do acknowledge that Russia is a very weak point for the party when it comes to alignment with the public, with one describing it as now the chink in the armour. A Reform source has said that some in the party believed that it would have done even better at the last election had Farage said nothing during the campaign that the ever eastward greater expansion of NATO and the European Union had given Putin a reason to go to war. It doesn't fit the mold which we would expect, which means he can go off on tangents. And so when he was asked about Ukraine, he was honest, the party insider said. Farage's stance on Russia does appear to have very shifted to become at least more critical in recent years, but he still has less hostility than more of his political opponents. He made over 17 different appearances on Russian state-funded TV, RT, between 2010 and 2014, while as an MEP for UKIP and the Brexit parties, several times he aligned with hard-right parties on Europe and the parliamentary vote to vote against EU motions that were critical of Russia. Over the past year, Farage has said that, of course, Putin was responsible for the war in Ukraine, has rejected Trump's description of Zelensky as a dictator, though he has said the country should move towards a more democratic elections, and has long been saying that this should be negotiated now end to the war. So, I'm changing my list, but there should be a negotiation. Okay, what should that negotiation look like? Oh, I wouldn't be too surprised if it's certainly very along the lines of Trump. Not too surprised at all. Another Reform spokesperson's highlighted comments this week by the party's own deputy leader, Richard Trice, saying Reform stands, quote, united against the monstrous tyranny of the most evil villain, Putin. And sure, he does. Like I say, that might change once they get in power, of course. That's why I think it's good to bring up these past statements. In the House of Commons debate to, of course, mark the 3rd anniversary of the invasion, Twice said, we at Reform, of course, stand behind with most of the House in support of Ukraine and, of course, the brave Ukrainians. The issue is that Putin is a vile dictator. We all know that. And my leader has also confirmed that it is Putin that is the aggressor in this war. Well, not before. He said very different things on this. Meanwhile, of course, Andy Burnham, the mayor of Greater Manchester, said that he had thought the next election could come down to a binary choice between Labour and Reform in the north. He has also said that Reform represents a very serious threat to potential by-election in Mike Aspel's Runcorn and Hemsworth seat in the future general elections because politics is now changing fast, and the UK has seen a meteoric growth of one political party. I think it will come to, in my view, not a traditional lineup of all the political parties, but more now as a binary choice at the next election. He said, because of the Conservative Party, I think they have almost made themselves irrelevant in what is now being left is some kind of tilted into this now new sort of right world view. I think the public won't get the same general election choice as normal, adding that things were moving towards now 2 options. again, I think again this reform panic. I don't see it. I don't get it. It's not turning out into election results like we were seeing in the run up to the last general election. Um, over 200 by-election results. You're not even in double digits. Well behind any of the other parties. Again, I'm not panicked. I am not panicked as I see other people panicking about, oh my god, there have been opinion polls. Well, okay, why then haven't these opinion polls turned into electoral results? Once that starts to happen, then maybe I will join in. But until that starts to happen, I think at the moment reform is an absolute paper tiger. Absolute paper tiger. Because that's what the real results are talking about. You can show me and mention as many opinion polls as you want, but quite frankly, all I'll turn around is just look at how many by-elections there have been. It's not the result of those by-elections have not been impressive, considering they're meant to be mega popular. Hasn't turned into electoral victories. And until that changes, I will say this: reform is not the threat people say it is. Sure, you should absolutely be attacking, Nigel Farage and reform. Absolutely, I won't say just ignore them. But for the time being, they're a paper tiger. They're an absolute paper tiger on this. But I am glad to see them taking the fight to this. I think this is something that should absolutely be taken to them. And I think if it does ever happen, hold their feet to the fire. If they say, "Oh, but we say this," question them on their stance. Hold their feet to the fire. What do they mean by negotiated end to the war? What do they mean by that? What negotiation? What exactly does that entail? Hold their feet to the fire, and I guarantee you they will fold. I will guarantee you they will fold because Farage, over the past couple of weeks of this coming up, has been very, very uncomfortable, especially when he's been on GB News talking about this. Very uncomfortable. And that has been very obvious on a lot of occasions. So, as always, thank you very much for watching. Let me know what you think down below as well. And of course, as always, we'll see you all next time.